Hi everyone, I'm Scott Schneider. This is Stereo Niche. I've got something exceptionally cool this week, so stick around. All right, so here we have the C49 from JBL, also known as the Dale. Now, the Dale was manufactured from the late 50s, around 58, through around, I think, 61 or so. They had a couple of models, 2 or 3 models that were similar in size. One was called the Madison. There was another called the Bel Air. And they were bookshelf type size speakers. Now, these were somewhat small at the time for bookshelves. Today, these would be considered large, but back then a bookshelf was actually the size of an Advent. So these were pretty small, comparatively speaking. So this set, to me, screams mid-century modern. I think they are probably one of the best looking speakers ever made, of that time frame. And they certainly talk of the mid-century modern era. Now, all the speakers models that JBL had, they weren't all looking mid-century modern. Many of them were just square boxes. They didn't, have a lot of design aesthetic to them, but these certainly do. And for that reason, they're just one of my favorite. I've not seen too many speakers that I think had a lot of design effort applied to them to make them visually appealing first. I think that is the case here. I think the first initiative here was to make them cool looking, and I think they accomplished that. After that, they decided to go with, how can we make, what options can we put out there as far as the sound equivalent, and what driver complement can we give it? But I think the designer of these, I think he hit a home run, at least for this goal that that they had set for that designer on a size, a price, etc. So I think they did very well. So let me get to the story first. So these speakers I bought from the original owner in about 10 years ago now, 11 years ago, and awesome gentleman. And before I bought them, he wanted to relay to me the story of why and when he acquired them. So he relayed that he bought them in January of 1960. And by the way, I know that because he gave me the receipt. So this is the receipt. On January 8th, 1960, he went to the store, the audio store, and bought these speakers. These have what's called the S5 driver complement, and they were $189 each, so $379 a pair. And the reason he went to buy them at this time was because just prior to this, he had been on a business trip. And that business trip required that he fly for the trip and then come back. So on the return flight, apparently the plane had some significant mechanical issue. And it was such an issue that he and other passengers felt they were not going to make it. So he decided that should they make it, the first thing he was going to do was go and buy the speakers he had been coveting, and he kept putting it off. So obviously they landed, and he made it home safe, and shortly afterwards he went and bought these speakers. So he had them from 1960 all the way to 2012. So he had him for a good number of years, and he cherished them. He kept them in wonderful shape. They have been moved around a bit. They have a little blemish here and there, but for the most part, for that many years, they're in very good shape. And I have adored them. Let me now at this point show you what they look like, without the grill on here. So hold on a second. Voila. So this is the upgraded driver configuration that you could have opted for. So this is called the S5 configuration. You could have bought them with an LE8 driver, And I know that, by the way, because I have a brochure here that shows that if you bought it in that configuration, this is what the complement would look like. Sorry, this is the other one. I've got multiple here, and I'm confusing you here. But so this is the single driver configuration. That was the first option. It would have been less expensive. Or you could have bought it with the LE10 woofer and the LE30 and LX3 crossover to upgrade them. And so the original owner opted for this higher level configuration. Now, I'm sure some of you are looking immediately at this cover here, thinking that it's a modification that the owner did. Well, it is original, and I've seen lots of pictures. Some of them have this cover and this port. Some of them don't. There are other pictures I've seen where it's a single driver with a square port here in this location. So, I don't know, maybe JBL sent them out with a configuration with pre-cut that so it can accommodate those different configurations at the store, or they produced some that were pre-configured and it was, had a square port and a single driver at the factory, and that was the only option, obviously. I don't know for sure, but I can just tell you that this is original, and I've seen quite a few with this, this cover over this port here. So, so anyway, that is what he bought. In addition to these speakers, he also bought a Scott 299 amp, which is very cool. I wish it still had it by the time I found the speakers, but he had passed it on long ago, he said. So he kept the speakers. I think they were quite personal for him, and I'm just terribly excited that I was able to get them, from him and be the caretaker of them while I have them. So, so I think that's pretty much it. I did want to mention that the LE-30 tweeter here is somewhat, I don't see it that often. I think it's a very cool tweeter. It's just a tweeter, I just don't see anything that looks similar to it, and for me it stands out. I did want to mention the woofers of this era included a different type of surround on it. That's a material at the time called Lanceloy. And that material, over decades, hardened. It was supposed to last forever. It certainly didn't. So when it hardens, obviously there's no movement of the woofer, so you have to fix it. And so there are two options. I consider it really only one option, which is what I chose here, which is to remove that Lanceloy material, which can be tedious. I managed to do it in a relatively short time. It's definitely slower than replacing and removing foam, but I was able to do it fairly quickly without really any damage to the cone. Now the problem is that Lanceloy material, they used a pretty heavy glue, and it would adhere quite securely to the cone, and you have to be very meticulous and very take your time, essentially, don't be in a rush to remove that material from the cone without damaging it. The frame is obviously robust. You're not going to damage the frame. There is a above, so there's the foam surround goes on the frame, and then above the frame there's a rubber gasket there. So you have to remove that gasket to be able to get all the material out and then replace and re-glue that gasket back in there. But the other option that I mentioned is for the Lanceloy is to coat it with brake fluid. I'm not sure who figured out and who thought about applying brake fluid to their driver surround to try and see if that would loosen it up, but apparently someone did at some point. And according to what I've read, it does actually loosen the driver and make it flexible again for a period of time. It's not permanent. The issue that I had with it is that it's a sort of pretty strong corrosive fluid, and you don't want to get it on your driver cone or anywhere else for that matter. So I decided not to even consider it. I went straight to changing out to an updated modern foam. Obviously that has a lifespan of 12, 15 years, I guess, but I decided to go that route rather than try to continually coat it. The brake fluid doesn't last. It might last a year. Then you have to do it again. And at some point at reapplying it, I just felt the risk was too high. So, so these have been refoamed, and the Lancelot material, while it looked cool, it just wasn't going to function well for me. So I decided to change that out. I think that's it. The last point that I was going to mention is the fact that they have feet, and the original owner never put them on. So these are brand new, have never been used, and I'm going to put them on, and we're going to see what it looks like. So stick around for the the last view, and then we'll take a look and see what they look like. Well, here they are. Just makes them look even that much more cool, I think. So I'll do some slow-mo here and let you get a look at what they look like up close. Most of it will be without the feet on, because I took this footage earlier. But then I'll come back and incorporate some of the shots here with the feet on. I can see why, now that I've put them on, I can see why the owner opted to either remove them after he bought them or never install them, because they do, while they're very strong, they become much more awkward to pick up and move around, because you just know that if you don't want to put the weight, when you're trying to pick them up, you have to turn them on their side a bit, and it's very awkward to pick them up without putting the weight on the feet while you're in transition of the weight. So I can see why he probably opted to leave those off and sit them flat. But any case, I think they're just ultra cool, and they set themselves apart even more with the feet on. So let me know what you guys think. All right, now you've seen how cool these things look. And I can't help myself, but I'm going to keep raving about that a bit. But let's get into it here and talk about the score. So starting off, we're going to talk about style. Well, I'm going to give probably the highest score I will ever give. And because I just don't see how there's really any other speaker that's going to be able to accommodate the amount of style they have and the size component, which is typically something I also evaluate. So do they have the style and aesthetic to make them look cool? And can they accommodate most situations where they can be set up? Well, these sort of cover all of it. And for that reason, I'm giving them a 20. I just can't see how something can be more perfect as far as anything I've seen so far. And these scream mid-century modern. I think they're just so perfect for the era, and their size component, you know, only adds to it. So for me, they get a perfect score of 20. So that's starting us right out of the gate. Now, moving on into sound, on the imaging side of things, I was pleasantly surprised. So I had these set up to have the tweeters on the outside. I did try them both ways, but I had the tweeters set up on the outside, which is where the logos are, by the way. And it was a nice image. I was pleasantly surprised because I just didn't have that expectation really. And voices were centered, but a little bit broad. I was surprised at being that like on the Advent, it's very narrow, but these were a little bit beyond that. They weren't the biggest soundstage, of course, but they were a nice size soundstage, and not just right there in the center. Now, they didn't bring a whole lot of airiness, but to me, it was actually more pleasant on the musicality of it than the Advent. So I ended up giving it actually one more point. So that to me was a bit of a surprise. On the low end, you know, there's just not a lot there. They try, of course. To me, I think they're best for background music, but these aren't going to shake the room. But if you want a nice, cool looking speaker it's going to fill up the room, you know, and give you some nice sound, but it's not going to shake the floors and things like that. So it's really, it's the weak point by far. And so on the low side, I gave them a 10. Onto the mids, I thought, well, the mids are their sweet spot, right? That's where they excel. If they're going to have a best area, it's the mids. I think the mid woofer does a very good job here at bringing out the voicing and the mid range, and so I gave it the same as the Advent here. I gave it a 16. On the high side, while I think the tweeter is very cool looking, it's also a little on the soft side, honestly. It's, I think for the era, I think it was ahead of its time, or leading the pack anyway, of that particular time frame. But compared to current speakers and, you know, more modern vintage speakers that had better technology on the tweeter side of things, they couldn't quite get there. I still liked it. I still thought it was very good and pleasant, but gets a 15 versus an Advent at the 16. And, you know, looking at other reviews I've done, certainly speakers that are much more accomplished and much better tweeters, the technology did get better. And I think that's one area that very much helped the range as far as tweeters are concerned. I think tweeters developed a lot better in about 20-year time frame after these. So anyway, it gets a 15 on the high side, and you add all that up, it still outscored the Advent at a 75. That is, of course, with the big help on the style side of things. So the style bonus it got there, not extra bonus, but the fact that it scored so high brought it over the line for the past the Advent, essentially. So these are the JBL The Dale, and I think they're just a really cool speaker. And if you run across a set, I think most people that want these are going to be more collector types. These are not, for most situations, going to be a speaker that you want as your only speaker, I don't believe. If you're just wanting something to have some background music and listen to some cool jazz and do that kind of thing, I think they're perfect for that. And that's the way I really plan to set them up. They, I think I did use them with my solid state amp, but I do think that they will even sound probably a little better with some tube amplification. So get your nice little 20 watt, 15 watt amp and hook these up to those. I think you will, I think you'll be rocking with that setup. and you know, chill out. I think that's what they will do best at. So anyway, a cool speaker, a rare speaker, one you don't see very often, and wanted to share that with you. If you want to keep up, see some more cool stuff, hit that subscribe button, and we'll see you next time.